Hi everybody, and welcome to your demonstration for your portrait. All right, as you know, we've been working with the grid, and you can see here I have my gridded photograph. Now, some of you guys might be working digitally. I know we worked with griddrawingtool.com. It's great if you can print off an image of yourself with the grid on it, but if you cannot, you can always work from a laptop or a phone and be able to see this image or your image digitally, okay? Now, regardless of what size paper you're working on, I know this is a large sheet of paper that we're working on here, and in some projects you might be working on a slightly smaller sheet of paper, but in relation to this large portrait, you guys can see I also have 8 by 10 boxes, okay? So 8 by 10 boxes, 8 by 10 boxes. So there should always be the same exact amount of boxes as you're working, okay? Now the tools we will be using is we will be using our 2H pencil, our 2B pencil, and our ebony pencil. All right, now the majority of this drawing can be done with your ebony pencil. However, I would save this primarily just for the dark sections and towards the end because it smudges more. Now you guys may have your own erasers. A lot of you guys do have the kneaded erasers. Some of you guys do not. Regardless, just make sure that you aren't drawing too hard too early because you do want to be able to erase well. Now some of these grid marks in here are a little bit on the harsher side. I did press down a little bit hard so you could see them, but you want to make sure that you can erase these easily towards the end, because one of the worst things that you can have is the impression of a line on your project after you're done. The grid is meant to disappear, okay? So please make sure all those grid marks do erase properly so that you do not have the impression of them once you're finished. Now, a lot of people do like to go ahead and label their grid, so you could potentially label it, you know, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, because it's 8 across, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 down, and you could go ahead and do that to correspond if you'd like to. So up here I could go A, B, C, and this is a great way for you guys to be able to navigate what box you're in. You know, it's pretty easy when you can say, you know what, I'm working in D3 or whatever box you're working in, just to make it a little bit easier to navigate your drawing, okay? So that's what I would encourage you guys to do, but this step is not mandatory, okay? So that will help me slightly better to understand exactly what I'm trying to do in regards to where I'm at in my drawing. All right, now, as I'm also working, you guys can notice that I'm going to work in the top rows first. Gradually, I will work my way down. Now, one of the reasons we do this is to avoid smudging. What you want to avoid is doing a lot of detail work, for instance, in the eye, and then working up here, and then before you know it, your hand has actually smudged all the shading that your eye just had captured, okay? So we want to avoid any sort of smudging like that. So please make sure that you're being aware of how you're trying to do that, all right? And lastly, as we're working, I would suggest that you guys really strive to work a little bit more within kind of like a typewriter method. So I'm gonna go A1, B1, C1, D1, all the way across row 1, then come down in row 2. A lot of people as well, if you have your printed out image, to make it simplified, you could even fold it so that you're only seeing everything in this top row. Now, because we're not paying attention to anything in the background, I know that for this, I would only draw where I see my hairline there, all right? And because I'm shading, what I would do is I would try to match that value. So I see here, this is a really, really dark value. So I'm gonna actually go in and I'm gonna start to shade. I'm gonna go past that box. A lot of people will erase the boxes as they go, and that's just to avoid the impression of the boxes, and I would suggest trying that as well. But I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna shade, and I know this is a really dark value, so I can use my ebony pencil. I'm gonna shade as I go across, all right? Now you're gonna notice it does get a little fuzzy with the ebony pencil, so you may wanna go back and work on the overall clarity in that image, and that might mean you go in and you work a little bit with your 2H over top, and that will smooth it out as well. But I want you guys to make sure you're avoiding smudging as you go. Now, if you get to different values, so for instance, the hair here catches the light, all right, so I can see some of the hair, I would go ahead and add in some of my dark surrounding that, all right, so I can kind of establish where that hair is. All right, and I know this is really, really dark in that value. If it was gray, I would just add a gray, but it's not gray. It's a really dark black. based on the shadow. So I'm gonna go ahead and plug that in. And then you can see as I'm shading, I'm actually going around some of the areas that I know are not jet black, all right? So I'm really calculating where I want my value and how I want to achieve that, okay? So for darker areas, it's okay if you wanna start slightly with your ebony pencil, that's fine. As long as you're working in the method I'm showing you so that you are not adding in the darks too early, too sloppy, all right? You really want to have a certain level of control as you're working with your pencils, all right? So I've gone in, I've got most of that done. There might be some more details, but again, you know, this is just a demonstration, so I want you guys just to get the overall gist of what we're doing, all right? Hair texture, I could add a little bit more later if I wanted to. Now, I can see this is not a bright white in the hair, so I may come in and I might even add a little bit of a cast. I like to use kind of circular motions when I'm adding my shading, just to try to avoid streaks, but you can see that's toning it down. Since this is not a bright highlight, I don't need a bright highlight. Now, if the 2H isn't giving me enough value, I could always come in with the 2B and press a little bit harder if I want a little bit of a darker gray. In those highlights, that's fine. You know, I could even use my ebony pencil by pressing down just a little bit lighter, and I've achieved a little variation of value there. As you can see, I've got a little bit of my hair texture in there. Now, you could always come in, you could add hairs over top. You know, you could add loose hairs. For instance, if there were looser hairs over here in your portrait, you might add in some of those details more towards the end. All right, but for now, we're just trying to achieve value. Now, when you're trying to work with your value, for instance, in certain sections like your skin, all right, so as I'm working here, I prefer to use my 2H pencil, so I'm gonna go ahead and erase some of my grid here in the skin, and I'm actually just gonna bump down. If I was to do this actual portrait the right way, I'd finish this whole row, second row, third row, but I'm gonna go down to the third row just to show you guys. I'm gonna use my 2H pencil for some of my middle grays, and I'm gonna establish a little bit of three-dimensional form, all right? I'm trying to make it look like there's highlights and shadows. So I can see that towards my hairline, it's gotten a little bit darker. And then as I come into the middle of the forehead, I'm gonna get slightly lighter. Now, it might not be bright white, all right, but I'm gonna gradually get a little bit lighter into my highlight there. All right, now, if you would like to go ahead and add in a little tint, like in here, it gets even darker with the ebony pencil, you could do that and you could enhance your contrast, but especially when you're working in the skin, be very, very careful not to go too dark with that ebony pencil if it is not jet black, okay? Because that will get really dark really soon. And you can see I have a nice gradation there, and that's going to pull out the shape of my forehead, and I could even pull out some of the hairs from that, and you can see how I'd work on the hairline there. All right, now in the eyes, I would suggest trying to work with your 2H as much as possible in the eye first. That's gonna give you the most control. All right, so for instance, I can see there are a lot of really light grays. I'm gonna work with my 2H here within the eye. I'm gonna make sure I avoid any areas that are bright white, like that striking highlight that's in there. I'm not gonna really touch that. And then I can go ahead and come in with the ebony pencil, add my jet black, which I can see is right in the middle here. And then any sort of secondary details in the eye speckling, you know, I can fade it in and out and really start to achieve a little bit of realism within that eye. You know, I'm not pressing down everywhere with this ebony either. You know, there are gonna be certain sections where I'm pressing down a little bit lighter because I want more of a middle tone gray. And you can do this with your 2B pencil as well, just to achieve some of that realism. Now, what I would encourage you guys to do is to look more at some tutorials. You know, this is just one demonstration, but that doesn't stop you from going online and really finding a variety, all right? There are a lot of different values within, you know, the eye, a lot of different ways to shade the eye, you know, making sure that you don't have just a flat white section in the eye. You know, there's even dimension within that. Making sure that you're erasing your grid lines as you're working so that you don't have the impression and that you're trying to achieve realism. You can always come back and you can add in, you know, whether it's some eyelashes or different things towards the end. But I would encourage you guys, work slowly, take your time, go box by box, and make sure you're erasing the grid as you go, because the worst thing that you can do is to have the impression of the grid, you know, after you finish your portrait, okay? So there's your demonstration. If you have questions, feel free to email me. Otherwise, work row by row as you go down. Keep it clean, get rid of your grit as you go, and then hopefully you'll have a nice portrait at the end. All right? So good luck, everybody, and email me if you have any questions. Take care.